So this is probably the only time you'll hear me talking in a PSO2 video that I make, but I figured it was easier than trying to edit together a bunch of stuff because I'm not good at that. So I'm going to be talking about Katana Phantom and specifically how I play it and what gear I use and a breakdown of like why I use it. So first, units are basically just in-game all attack as best I can do. I have wise skill, or as it would be known on the NA version, this would be skillful adept as 6, and a few other just all attack augments. This is all relatively middle of the road, cheaper end affixes. I didn't go really ham with the like real big affixes since I didn't really have the cash to, and these are still serviceable for end game. Next up I have my arms, which have Rainbow Skill, which would probably be called Rainbow Adept when it finally comes out on NA, and that's only for one specific Katana build that I have, one specific Katana fix that I have. Those augments I wouldn't really recommend, so this S7 would technically be better if it was Fortified Attack 2 or Attack Up 2 on JP. That's probably the better bet for an S7. It is a bit flexible as most unit affixes are. And finally I have my rear, which I have Skydance Spoon or Skydance Support on NA. Very completely useful. Everyone knows this is, you know, the top tier of the fixes you can do for a rear. So those are your general S grade augments for units. I also have the lock on bomb ring and the critical attack ring. So on to the more important thing, weapons. So this first one I'm going to show is just the general one you'll be using. You need at least, I think it's 280 PP to make this really work well. If you don't have 288 PP, this is not going to get you 100% crit rate, but it'll get you close. If you're anywhere close to 280, you're generally fine. If you want that 100% crit rate, I recommend going up to 280, or if you can make it to 300. As you can see, I'm at 298 currently with this Katana equipped. I have my current unit set up. So this Katana has on it Augment Intent 2, which on NA this would be Augment Will 2. These can be traded out for the... That's not on NA at the moment, to my knowledge. Instead, you will have to be using just straight up Augment Will, which is fine. Any of these can be swapped out for their non-2 version. So Augment Will, and then the Skilled Intents would be Precision Will 2. So those can be swapped out for just simply Precision Will until you can get the other versions, these upgraded versions. So this one just boosts power for each augment you have on your weapon to a max of a 6% damage boost, and each of these are 4% to critical damage and 5% to critical damage. For S4, I recommend evasion or dodge training on NA. This is mostly if you're going to be doing a lot of sandbag boss content, stuff where you're not going to be able to just really spam heavy on your counters on Katana, which is your main goal for a good amount of damage output, is to be in close, hit your counters, and hit your main damaging PA falter as much as possible. So I recommend this. Helps a lot with stuff like Mother Deus fight or the final boss fight urgent quest that has recently been added to NA. These help a lot with certain phases of that fight and with the Mother and Deus fight, as there are not a lot of good opportunities to counter and reply to the boss when you're doing damage to the core on Mother. She's generally stunned and not really throwing out attacks. Same with Deus. So this helps out a lot in those circumstances. If you're not going to be fighting sandbag heavy bosses like that, then the technically higher damage S4 would be Escalating Pursuit or Raising Pursuit if you're on JP. That will be your better bet for an S4, just straight damage wise. However, I do prefer evasion training myself because of the added bonus of, well, the healing, as you just saw. If you mistime it, or when you land it, you gain all the benefits of a counter for Katana, so PP back, marker gen from the counter bits. You also get a heavy chunk of your damage from your counter bits, so that also helps a lot. You can, while you're spamming your main damage PA filter, you can step out of any part of this move at any point in time and hit this, make sure that you hit this ring so that you can then throw out the bits and immediately start going back into filter rotations. So, highly recommended. In my opinion, it's probably the best F4. Like I said, Escalating Pursuit technically gives you the better damage overall, and if you're fighting a counter-heavy boss, then evasion training is not needed at all, and is actually a little bit of a downside because you're not going to be wanting to try and hit rings while you're also doing other things if the boss already has plenty of counter opportunities. You instead want that guaranteed damage from Escalating Pursuit. For S5, I go Hungeki Edge or Counter Blade if you're on NA. It does a bit more than what it reads out here, and that can be a bit confusing, especially on NA, as this line of text I think is even smaller if I remember correctly. Essentially what a Hungeki Edge does is it increases all damage your katana deals by 2%. This includes any PAs and any normal attacks that you may do, any counters, any weapon action damage, marker pops, everything you do with the katana is increased by a blanket 2%. On top of this, you also have a hidden bonus of an increased 10% damage on your counter bits, which is those little bullets that you shoot out on a successful counter. Well, not a great example if I don't land the counter ring, but those themselves will do an extra 10% damage. So overall, your counters hit for 12% damage, more than they would normally. There's technically another hidden fact about this for Bravers specifically. It increases their counter damage by, their weapon action counter damage by 15%, as opposed to the 10% that Phantom gets, but as we're focusing on Phantom here, I just still wanted to note it. As far as the other affixes I have for this katana, oh, and I should mention, I almost forgot, this katana is the Crass katana, or Claws, as I believe it's written on it in A. Same with my units, they're all the endgame units, the Crass units or Claws units as they are in an A. And I'll have a link to a picture of my current gear set for anyone that wants it. These are both this top tier as you can go really in terms of damage and just raw stats, as well as the potential that they have, which I'll go over briefly after I get through these affixes. But I did want to note that these weapons technically aren't out on NA that I know of, but they should be relatively soon, within the next week or so. These should be out on NA, and you should be able to start working towards creating these. The current weapons, the air, or I actually forgot to look up what the name of that would be on NA, but these one step down version of these weapons it should be on NA. If I'm wrong about that, sorry, they should be coming soon. They do not support an S5, but they support every other S-grade augment. So I recommend just going the same thing, just without the Hungeki Edge. And that's if you're using Lightstream. I recommend this setup, Evasion Training Hungeki Edge, and if you're running Purus, I recommend the Augment and Precision combo along with Hungeki Edge. For the other augments, Phrase Decay is a no-brainer for Phantoms, as they apply gelin on everything they do, so might as well benefit from a 5% increase in damage. I also just ran a simple Grace power or Grace melee. I believe it's called on NA, just the simple melee attack plus 50, PP plus 5, and then the Astral Soul, which is in SAF for both the Yugian and Ray weapon series. But so relatively simple fixes, and these are perfectly doable and usable. So that's the main katana build I would recommend, is this one. It's a lot simpler than my other one, and it's still a really solid build that will really push a lot of what you can do from Phantom Katana to its fullest. The second weapon I have, which I will switch to right now, as you can see my PP went up to 300 exactly. So with this katana, at 300 PP you will have 60% crit rate from your Phantom tree, from the critical stream skill. Then all you need is the critical ring, and you will be hitting 80% crit rate. And then your innate 5% for being a certain class, and as long as you have Y skill or skillful adept, if you're on an A, as long as you have this for your S6, that will increase it by another 15%, bringing you to 100% crit rate. This is important for both builds, technically. This really helps bring a lot of your crit rate back up to push it to 100%, or at least close. So I would recommend farming this out if you can. There's really no better S6. This is the best, and there's no other real replacement for it either. You can technically use anything else if you don't have Y skill yet, but this is a major boon and really helps you push up to that 100% crit rate tier. So with this current katana, I am running a red petal, or for an A, that would be the petal gleam combo. Sorry. So this would be petal gleam, rainbow will, petal sea song 2, or petal sea song, whichever one you can get your hands on. Precise balance and skillful adept will. What this combo allows me to do, along with my unique unit S7, which is unfortunately not on an A yet, which is another reason why I wouldn't exactly recommend this build. That S-grade augment, unit S-grade augment, is an additional 30% crit rate, as long as any of your petal gleam, sea gleam, any of those, as long as one of those is active, this will increase your crit rate by 30%. So with this combination, I am able to hit 150% crit rate, and that's where the skill balance, or precise balance if you're on an A, comes in, lowering your crit rate by 50%, but increasing your overall damage your overall critical damage by 6%. This includes critical damage markers. This katana costs a lot for me to make, and prices vary from ship to ship and JP to NA, but still, in relative terms, this cost me almost as much, or more, than one of my units, than affixing just one of my units. This was a very expensive creation, but the plus side is that this is probably, at least from my playtime and from my testing, this is like the strongest. This is peak as far as you can push Katana Phantom. But it's specifically Katana only. Swapping off of this Katana for anything else is going to drop your red petal, or your petal gleam, excuse me. It will turn that off, and your damage will go way down, as well as your crit rate, which is going to make you suffer, because you'll drop from 100% down to only 50% crit rate, and that's going to really hurt you. So it will drop you to my apologies, it'll drop you to 70% crit rate. Still, not great. But this really pushes the boundaries of what Katana can do. I also equipped it with Guardian Soul, which is the strongest soul affix you can create. This is created out of a bunch of different things, and I'm sure you can look up a guide on how to piece it together. I had someone else help me with this affix, but this augment set is probably the strongest thing out there. I even put on a grand capsule as well. So this is specifically the most useful though on counter heavy bosses. So like I said before, technically the dodge training S4 is better for any if you do a lot of sandbagging content, but if you don't, or you play something like the final boss urgent quest where there's different phases and you want to focus on specifically that second phase, this will just help you out a lot more. So I'll talk a little bit about the potential that comes with these weapons. So the standard potential is a damage increase plus PP efficiency and PP regen. However, after a few seconds within a quest and a little bit after start, and then I believe it's 30 seconds thereafter, you will notice that when you normal attack, you see this little symbol show up below your feet. What that means is that you've done one of the 3 normal attacks required to activate the potential. As you can see, there's 2 when I do 2 attacks, and there's the 3rd. Now once you see that symbol flash on the ground and this swirl effect happen around your character, that means you have the potential procced. Now your other potential is removed and instead is replaced with this potential. For 30 seconds, boost damage by 18% and you reduce damage taken by 30%, and it also gives you the standing massive or the knockback prevention, which is incredibly useful in boss fights. If you take a little bit of damage, you're not going to be knocked out of whatever you're doing, you're not going to be knocked out of your damage rotations, nothing like that. So this is a very strong potential. It's unfortunately, it does require 3 normals to activate, but the advantage being that Katana normals are very fast compared to the other weapon normals. As we see with rifle, these are very slow, as well as rod normals are not the fastest and can sometimes be hard to proc correctly. But Katana, very simple. So some advice I can give on playstyle wise is if you're fighting a sandbag boss like this, you want to land those counterings as much as possible. And then I would either, after landing a counter, I would either, if you're in the air already, I would dodge backwards and then press Schmetterling. This will give you a quick way to both counter and reply with the bits, as well as a melee attack very quickly and get you in range for more filter spam. Now, at any point, it is good to try and pop a marker, but that depends on boss movement, which you'll have to learn over time if they're fighting a boss. If you know they're about to do an attack, you may want to save and not be charging up a marker, since you do not have guard frames on this weapon release. You only have minor iframes during part of the animation, which aren't exactly super reliable. So it's usually better to, if you know an attack's coming, simply counter, hop back in, then bother with popping the marker. I would also wait, if you can, for stuff like filter to finish that last hit before holding weapon action, as well as Schmetterling's final few hits. However, the problem with Schmetterling is if you wait too long, you'll get what happened there, which is you'll get the quick cut timing instead. So it's just something to keep in mind when popping markers, is that you really have to pay attention to what the boss is actually doing themselves. So the main trick I can offer is that Schmetterling, if you're in the air, will get closer to the boss very easily. And you can change your angle around a bit, move back, forward. You can even step forward or back with Schmetterling and just stay right up on the whatever you're fighting. However, if you use it from the ground like you saw there, you'll simply move forward and miss your weak spot if your weak spot is in the air. So for moments like that, I instead recommend step attacking and then either quick cutting to the target and throwing out a shift rose, or depending on if you have time or not, maybe you need something faster, so like a shift Vulcan to throw out the dart before immediately jumping back in with Schmetterling. This will put you in the air enough so that you can Schmetterling back to the weak point freely. Also, if the boss suddenly jumps, a good move if they're relatively far away but aren't moving left or right or up and down too much is Rose. Has good reach, glap closes pretty well, and if you need to, you can even wait for the quick cut timing as it's relatively quick to get in. Let's see. Other things is that your step attack does have a guard frame at the very beginning, which can be useful in situations where you want to multi-counter, is to quickly just do something like this, step back and attack repeatedly. As you will, if it's a multi-hitting attack, you'll either be guarding or step countering the multi-hits. Some might eke through, just as the way of that Phantom Katana is. They don't have a lot of iframe on their counter attack replies, so you'll be suffering in that department. One other thing to keep in mind is that Vulcan normal can be used for a bit of a drop to the ground. I would never let this animation finish out in the middle of a boss fight though. I would always cancel it with a step, either just before you hit the ground or just after you hit the ground. The problem is that there is a bit of hit stun, as you can see when that happens, a little bit of hit lag, animation lock from the actual shockwave that can kind of mess with you. So if you're worried about that, I would just cancel it right before you hit the ground and then move into either a step attack, quick cut, shift rose, Schmetterling, into bolter combo, or step attack, quick cut, step attack, quick cut into Vulcan, shift Vulcan into Schmetterling into bolter. Schmetterling I would keep, only use that when you're in the air if you have a weak spot like this one is, that's above the ground. Since, like I said before, you don't get a lot of vertical height if you're currently on the ground when you use it. Another good general thing is to just, something you will learn over time is knowing when to throw the counter bits or not. Sometimes it's more important to be repositioning or charging up either a marker detonation or casting something like Zonverse to help with your marker pop damage as opposed to throwing the bits. There are other times as well knowing when to pop a marker. Sometimes you don't want to be sitting around popping a marker if an attack's coming up that you can counter instead. Your counters, without taking any points in Lord of Thorns, your counters with Hangeki Edge or with this current build will be hitting for roughly 50% of your counter. Of your marker popping. Your marker detonations hit very hard, and especially if you take points in Lord of Thorns. If you do take 3 points, which is what I'd recommend into Lord of Thorns, if you were taking any points, if you do take those, I would recommend, counters are still technically better than waiting and trying to pop a marker and eating an attack in the process. Simply because you don't have a lot of life as a Phantom, and your damage resistance only starts coming into play after you've gone below 50% health, so there's still a chance you'll get one shot if the move is particularly heavy hitting. And overall, it's just a bit too much of a risk to sit around charging up this weapon action to release, even if it is the fastest of the 3 weapons to charge up. It's still a bit of a risk to be sitting around doing this when you could instead be step countering different moves. They still do a lot of damage even if you take points into Lord Thorns. They're still doing a sizable chunk of your damage, and they are still your focus. The other thing, as I mentioned briefly, that I would recommend, if you have the chance to mid-combat, like if you have a boss that does a wide swing at you, and something that has a bit of lag time after before he's going to reply again, a decent strat is to either tap Zone Burst, swing, then charge up and detonate a marker. The swing is to allow you to actually cancel into the weapon action charge, since tapping Zone Burst in midair and then pressing weapon action causes you to fall down to the ground like so. If I jump up here, touch it, and then mash weapon action, you can see that only allows me to do that from down here. So the better strat is to tap Zone Burst, JA a swing, and then weapon action. If you have a long chance, such as the boss moving or doing something else unexpected, using a charged Zone Burst to get that sprint speed from the Phantom Tree in order to quickly close the gap and also drop on the floor while you do damage is also very helpful. This adds a lot more damage to everything you do, and if there's a marker to be popped and you have a chance to, charging up a Zone Burst to full charge and then releasing and then detonating the marker is going to do a lot of damage. I can demonstrate as such. Alright, so I have a fully charged marker, I charge up a Zone Burst, I jump up, detonate the marker, and you can see that large chunk that followed. The over 300k damage just free on top of the near, over 1 mil marker pop. So, bunch of free damage. It's especially very useful for something like Folter in order to really pump a lot of damage out of that. A lot more damage out of that, as well as your counter bits. As long as you were somewhere near the Zone Burst when you're throwing the counter bits, they will do so the Zone Burst will also proc damage on the counter bits, which is going to help you out a lot. So that's just a quick breakdown of like how I play Katana Phantom, what I'm searching for. It's a lot of knowing the boss and what the boss is going to do, and a lot of always keeping up on movement and DPS. Learning these quick cut timings is super important. Even I mess them up from time to time, as you just saw. And it's going to take a little bit of boss fight knowledge and just fighting bosses repeatedly to learn things like when you should be using Shift Vulcan after a flip kick versus or after a quick cut versus something like Shift Rose, which takes a little bit longer to go out but puts up a position field, which can be very helpful. Your other shift moves aren't used quite as much. In particular, Shift Schmetterling is hardly ever used except for an emergency iframe, since it has iframes for so long and gets you around the map. Especially if you use Unlock On while doing it, you can really gain a lot of interesting movement that way that's completely safe until the very end of it. The other shift action that's not used too much in the middle of a boss fight, but can be if you really learn how to use it well, is Shift Filter for the slash through. I hardly use this much myself unless I need a quick answer to a boss attack that I'm not ready to step counter, or don't otherwise have an opportunity to, or it wouldn't benefit me to. Like I said, there's very few instances where you'll be abusing iframes later on after you really learn Katana Phantom, since your counter bits are so imperative to your damage output. You're going to be wanting to land these step counters instead. But these tools do exist for a reason. They're very helpful. The iframes on all of them are super nice for just movement in general and staying safe. So again, my playstyle revolves around step countering when I can, shift rows for long range gap closing, utilizing step attack into quick cut in order for a quick just jump into the enemy from even from very far away. It's a very quick gap closer that if the boss has a particularly long ranged attack that you know you can step counter, excuse me, then you can step counter it, throw the bits, and then zip right back into his face. Unfortunately, a lot of Phantom Katana does come from fight experience and just overall fight knowledge, so it's going to be difficult at first. It's going to take a lot of hours of practice and practice and practice to even put out some decent damage against certain bosses. And you'll see things like Solo Masquerader. They're going to, by depth 100, they're going to start taking you a while just simply because his damage resistance mechanic just starts cutting out all your best damage options. Your two best ones being Rose and Bolter. They'll eventually just start resisting those, which means you have to really start heavily relying on Schmetterling as well as all of your shift PAs in order to keep the damage up on him, which you can see me doing in some of the videos I have up. The other issue is with Mass specifically is that eventually he does resist your counter bits, and that's where, like I said, a lot of your damage comes from. So eventually, you know, learning how to properly rotate through which abilities to use where is very important and will just take time. I'm hoping to upload some more videos of me doing other hiring content as I can get them recorded and put out. It is a lot of work to complete some of these tasks on Katana Phantom versus something like Cluster, which can barrel roll through most content pretty easily. Phantom does take, Katana specifically, does take a lot of work, and unfortunately, the reward in terms of damage, rather small. The reward in terms of style and just looking amazing, freaking through the roof. 10 out of 10. Love the way this class looks. I personally love the way Katana feels. I know not many would agree on that, but if putting in the work, you can still pull respectable damage. It's just going to take a lot of time. You need to really know the boss very well and know what you're doing, step attacks and landing them, and just trying to make as few mistakes as possible. These builds, this is by far the safest. This is the one I would recommend. It's also the cheapest of the two, but will still pump out some major damage. This does equivalent damage to this build, but at like way less than half the cost. It's insane. This is such a relatively small upgrade, but it's one that I do notice, and I still prefer this build personally when I can get away with it. The healing from Mysterious Purpose, while minor, honestly helps me out a lot. Gives me a lot more of a comfort zone in that regard. But overall, this one's a little too niche for me to really recommend. However, this one is amazing. Hands down, I was recommended this by a friend of mine who played a lot of Katana Phantom before. He moved on to Bouncer and some other classes and has played around with Luster recently. But he helped Theorycraft and like recommend this general setup. He switches out the S4, like I said, for Escalating Pursuit, but other than that, this is basically the build he recommended me, and as soon as you're able, this is one I recommend doing. Again, these can be swapped out for the non-2 versions and be perfectly fine. A point of note, this counterblade is the built-in effects for both the Rivalate Katana and the Claws Katana. Once you're able to create that, both of those come with that built in, and you just have to do a simple quick fix to put it on there. So with that said, I hope this helped a few people. If anyone wants a little bit more of a better breakdown, I can write out like I can attempt writing out an actual script and doing some more editing and whatnot. Otherwise, I'll usually just be putting up more gameplay videos and with no talking, thankfully. So this should be the last time you hear me speaking on here. But thank you for anyone watching. I hope this helps anyone else as well. And I'll see you guys later.